Don this morning was talking a lot about healthcare, and healthcare is obviously a big part of what we do, but not the only industry we're involved with. The second largest after healthcare would be financial services. So today, myself, Joe Gallant, I manage a sales engineering team within the financial services group. Wei-Wen Lee and myself will be showing you a couple of demos, one that highlights our IRIS adaptive analytics capability, and another that highlights our high-speed ingestion and do an analysis on data. While they are financial service specific demos, they do show technology that could apply to pretty much any industry. So I'll give you just a brief introduction of some of the stuff we do in financial services, but very brief. If you did not attend it, earlier today, Joe Lichtenberg had a session with more detail about InterSystems and financial services. So the contents of all these sessions will be posted. So if you didn't get a chance to attend that, you can look for that after the event. So he went into a lot more detail than I will go into. I'm going to do it very briefly just to set the context for the two demos that you will see. So what we do in financial services is pretty much what we do for every other industry. Focusing on complex business processes, decision-making, fast time to value, low total cost of ownership, better performance. Those core capabilities that are in IRIS apply to lots of industries, and they're definitely in high demand within financial services. To give you a flavor of some of the companies in financial services that InterSystems has as customers now, you see a variety of different customers here, from banks to investment companies, to fintechs. Fintech is a term that companies that develop software for financial service customers, so Fiserv and Broadridge are two examples of that. We have banks, we have investment companies, like MSF Investment Management. They actually created mutual funds. The very first mutual fund was created by MFS in Boston in 1920-something? 1924, and it still exists, that mutual fund still exists. And obviously you might recognize some names here from the US, but international customers too, NatWest and HSBC, Lloyds Bank from the UK, Caixa, and Banco do Brasil down in Brazil, Cananga, a new customer of ours in Malaysia. So not just US customers, but worldwide, we have a lot of customers in financial services. What types of things can they do? Pretty much anything you can do in financial services. I was debating putting up this slide because it seems like more of an eye test than, than anything, but lots of things. Joe in his session earlier today talked specifically about some Business 360 offerings that we have, but people are doing anything from hyper-personalization, order management systems, back office trading, pretty much anything in financial services people are doing with InterSystems technology. So that sort of sets the stage for the two demos we're gonna see now. The first of those demos is a business management reporting demo where we're gonna focus on visualizing data for the business manager. This is gonna use InterSystems IRIS Adaptive Analytics. Through our partnership with AtScale, we introduced InterSystems IRIS Adaptive Analytics, I believe, 2 years ago. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So we'll see that in action as part of this demo. And with IRIS Adaptive Analytics, you can use lots of different visualization tools. This particular one will use Tableau. So let's talk a little bit about the demo before we see it in action. So the goal here was to create a business management reporting, variety of different dashboards and reports. We did this over several weeks, and the core tasks were creating the raw data set, building the analytics, configuring these virtual cubes that we'll talk about in just a bit, and creating the ultimate visualizations, in this case, with Tableau. So we got data from a variety of places, reference data, security data, 30 years of historical prices, lots of different analytic-related data. So that's the core of what you will see. And let's show a little bit of an architecture picture here before we see the demo in action. So I'm going to start the demo by showing the end result. What does the end user see? You're going to see a variety of Tableau screens looking at the data. The nice part about that is anyone who knows Tableau can just analyze that data. It's presented in a very consistent way, a series of dimensions and measures. They don't need to care where the data come from. How many different systems did it come from? How was it ingested? Who cares? Someone presented them this nice virtual cube, and from that, they can do the analysis they need. But what's happening behind the scenes is we brought in a lot of data from many different sources and brought that into InterSystems IRIS. And of course, with InterSystems IRIS, you have lots of flexibility. Through our ECP, Enterprise Cache Protocol, you can have data spread across multiple systems, multiple servers, but still creating that one consistent view of the data. And in this case, by the way, once the data is here, you can still do traditional SQL type queries. But one of the advantages of IRIS Adaptive Analytics is we can create these virtual cubes, which we'll see in action and look behind the scenes in a bit. And these virtual cubes allow you to do analysis and doing self-service analysis using pretty much any tool you want to use. Popular ones are things like Tableau, Power BI, Excel. I'm going to focus on Tableau for this one. And what's happening is these tools are querying the cubes, and these cubes send queries ultimately to the data that's in IRIS. So enough slides for now, thank God. Let's switch to the demo. So what we see here, so a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I'll use less than 1,000 because you have the picture. So here is a dashboard. This is something typical, maybe a CEO, a chief financial officer, maybe a head of trading or risk manager might want to look at. And if you look in these pie charts in the upper left-hand corner, they're showing things like market value position, total P&L, risk. If you look underneath that, we've got information by quarter. On the bottom here, we have historical analysis, exposure analysis, both for sovereigns and corporate bonds. On the middle right there, you see a trend analysis of the P&L over time. So this is one type of thing you could use. By the way, over here on the left, you see well, actually, this is a better example of that. Here's a chart, or table rather. This one showing risk exposure over time, key rate durations of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. And once you're in Tableau, you have access to all the dimensions, all the measures. This is truly self-service. You can create whatever you need. Where is this data coming from? I don't necessarily need to know to solve this problem. The person who set up the cube and connected everything with IRIS worried about all those details. So I have a very simple interface, whether I'm using this, whether I'm using Excel. And by the way, if I happen to have one of these calculated fields, instead of saying, how do I do that calculation in Excel? Now, how do I do that calculation in Tableau? And if I have different people using different tools, I sure hope those give me the same result. Well, instead of that, put your calculation within the model of the cube that I'll show you in a bit. And now, regardless of which tool you use, you're going to get a consistent result. So the cube is creating this virtual data model that allows you consistent access across the variety of user interface tools. You have a few other reports here we can take a look at. The more fun part is looking behind the scenes to see what's happening. So here's something maybe a CEO may want to see by quarter, broken down by sovereigns, by sectors and trading books. Here's some charts. Here's a historical portfolio. Here's a historical portfolio with exposure versus the limits. Lastly, here we have a particular chart showing equities and sovereigns and corporates over time with P&L. So I'm not here to show you what Tableau can do. I'm more here to show you what you can do with Tableau using InterSystems IRIS Adaptive Analytics. So let's leave the right side of that diagram that I showed you, and now let's look behind the scenes of what is Tableau actually connecting to? How is it presenting to me this consistent set of dimensions and measures? So let me switch here. And what I'm now showing you is part of InterSystems IRIS Adaptive Analytics, again, through our partnership with AtScale. So this is the data model. What I'm showing you now is the design center, one of the components of AtScale. And what I see here in the middle, let me zoom in here a bit, is a position table and how it's connected to different dimensions. So I have sector, I have security, I have trading book, and I have measures over here. I have a whole lot of different measures that I'm using. And these are defined through a simple point-and-click interface. I connect to a data source. I decide what I want as a dimension or measure. For example, one of our measures here, if I can find it, we have one here called position. Let me drill into that and zoom in here a bit for those in the back. So here's a measure called position. What is it? Well, it's actually pointing to a field in the database called quantity. What a terrible name for a column in a database. Like, quantity of what? That's like having a field called date. Like, what does that mean? So one of the important parts about creating a meaningful data model is giving these things meaningful names, so when a person sees that list show up, they know exactly what it means. So you don't, by default, we're going to call it whatever the table called it because We don't know what else to call it. But in reality, you should give these things meaning. If someone can look at that name that you create in the cube and they don't know what it means, that's your fault. You had your choice, you create the cube to create these meaningful names. So creating these consistent, meaningful names to allow people to do things like this. So there's a whole bunch of different measures, dimensions, and then calculated measures as well. There's a variety of different calculated measures. Again, if you do the calculated measure here, you'll get a consistent result regardless of what front-end tool you use. You don't have to worry about matching your Excel formula to your Tableau formula. Also, from the person using it, they don't know what's a calculated measure. It's just the name they use, they reference it, they get a value. So through the benefit of IRIS Adaptive Analytics, you now have this virtual data model. And when I say virtual, what does that mean? We define a cube, but we don't build the cube. We define the cube, and as soon as it's defined, you can query it. And IRIS Adaptive Analytics learns from the queries you do. Initially, it will query the main database. As a matter of fact, it keeps a complete history of all the queries that were done, that were received from the variety of different front-end tools you may be using, and a complete record, and also how long it took to run those queries. And also, let's take a look at a particular query here. Let's try this one. So here's a query that came in, and it says, let me zoom in here. It says it used some caching, but also used AGGS, AGS. What's that? Well, as you query things, IRIS Adaptive Analytics learns from the queries you do. And they create these optimization structures called aggregates that will help with future queries. Not only the query you did, but potentially other queries you haven't done yet. When it creates an aggregate, it tries to determine through machine learning the types of things you're doing, and it will create these optimization structures. So if I see this particular query, this is the query that was received from Tableau. Notice it's querying this thing called FSA cube, the virtual cube. But what it actually ended up doing was sending a query to the IRIS database. And in this query, it's actually using not just the raw tables, but a lot of these aggregation tables as well. So this query took only, we can see it here, 0.62 seconds. Mostly because it was using the aggregates, also because it's using a little bit of the cache too. But these aggregates, we also keep track of. So let's look at one of the particular aggregates right here. Here's an aggregate that, is this a good one? It's not a good one. Look for a better one. Here we go. Here's an aggregate that has all these different measures in it. It's been used, this, we only saved a minute for this. I'm looking for one with a lot. I just did a lot of queries. Let's find a good one. Here we go. Here's an aggregate that we've used a bunch of times. And that we've actually saved a total of 6 hours and 25 minutes because of this aggregate. So every time we use this aggregate, we monitor how much time that took. And compare that to when the aggregate was built, how much time did it take to do the actual query? So, and over time, you can rebuild these aggregates as you get new data coming in. And there's two main types of aggregates. Aggregates where the system will build them for you based on what you're doing. And then there's the, trust me, I want this aggregate. I know what I'm doing, so you can, if you want, manually, or not manually, but through user-defined aggregates, say, I want an optimization with this measure, this dimension, because I know I'm going to query it a lot. And there's whole admin capability you can monitor and deal with these. So the great benefit there from IRIS Adaptive Analytics is you have a central unified model that abstracts the data. You don't have to build the cube first. It will learn as you do the queries. And you can pick whatever tool you want to use to do your queries. I have to go back to PowerPoint now because it didn't let me do it before. There we go. Yeah, so regardless of which tool you use Excel, you use Tableau, you use Power BI, you use Click, you decide. So one important thing is IRIS Adaptive Analytics, which is using at scale, provides the virtualization to do the queries. You still need to use some popular visualization tool, and again, whatever tool you'd like to use. It can connect both via SQL and MDX regardless of the tool. So that's the end of the first demo we're going to show today, business management reporting. Since we have 2 demos to do and trying to squeeze everything in, we're going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions right now, just hold them for a bit. You'll have plenty of time to do that. What I'd like to do now is talk about the next demo, or actually have Wei-Wen talk about the next demo, which is live trade valuation.
So the next demo we're going to talk about, as Joe mentioned, thank you very much, Joe, is the live trade valuation. What we did here was we tried to simulate what a trader in the financial services world would look at from a portfolio or blotter point of view. So if you're not familiar with how the financial services world work from a trader standpoint, what they do is they look at fast-moving data. They get live prices coming in, they get live trades coming in. Some of it will be automatic, some of it will be manual. And they have a blotter view. And really what the point of the blotter is ingestion speed. So we get a lot of prices coming in, and it could be 1,000 prices per second, where the trader is constantly getting updated on their P&L, on their risk, and so forth. So the intent of what we did here was to try to simulate that and show you how the IRIS platform can handle ingestion speed specifically. So what we did was, I will go to the next slide. From a context standpoint, what we did was, as I had mentioned before, we built a portfolio view of incoming trades and prices. We built it on top of Kafka to feed in the prices in a real-time manner. We created the base data sets, as well as the virtualization layer. We built it on top of the IRIS platform. And we basically targeted 10 particular tickers that would during the COVID period. And we have historical prices that we had purchased, and we simulated trades as well. So from an analytics standpoint, we calculated market value, an estimated P&L, and we added some additional pricing models in to show you that analytics can be integrated into this particular model. From an architectural standpoint, as mentioned, we have basically Kafka brokers, which has a price and a trade topic. So we basically preload the prices and trades, and we simulate as if we were in external market feed, sending it into our implementation. Our implementation, we have basically, we built on top, we have a price component, which will take in all the prices and basically feed them into a compute valuation. We have trades, which come in, and we aggregate them into a trade position. And the trade position is basically, from a financial services standpoint, is aggregation by an account or by an ticker. In this case, we use one account, DemoSys account, and we aggregate everything by ticker. So if you were buying an Apple stock, and you bought 100 shares of Apple stock, and you bought 5 minutes later another 100 shares of Apple stock, you wouldn't want to see those multiple lines. You would want to see that you have a 200 shares of Apple stock. So we take that, we aggregate it. We also, as part of the IRIS platform, is we persist everything. So if anything were to go down, we could basically bring it back up. So we snapshot each one of these components, and if everything go down, we could bring it back up almost instantaneously. Now, this is all done in a real-time fashion. And when you say real-time, people think about, well, what does real-time really mean to a lot of people? So there's a real-time is really when an event happens, you want to see that event. The real question is, how fast do you want to see it? So there are certain events, like if I were saying, I was in a car, got in an accident, I want my insurance guys to know that an event happened, so forth. But in the financial services world, I have a price event, a price changes. A price can change, as I said before, 1,000 times per second. So in that particular case, I want to be able to ingest all those moving data as quickly as possible. So we'll go and switch to go ahead and start that. So what you see here is now we're feeding in trades and prices. Now this is going through from the Kafka broker into the IRIS platform into this web page using WebSocket. IRIS platform is doing all these calculations in the back end and sending it back out. We're roughly sending about 26,000 messages per second at this particular time. And what we can also do is we can select a specific ticker. And you can see from that standpoint, now the web page will basically regraph an estimated P&L, all the trades that are coming in. And what we have here are some analytics on top of that, where we would calculate some residual price versus the incoming price. And what we graph here is our calculated, the incoming, and the difference. So we built some basic models, nothing which actually does price predictions, because if we did, we wouldn't be in this business, we would be retired. But if we were to do something like a multi-year average, where we take the prices from past history, calculate the average and say, well, this is what it was in a 901 time slot, a 902 time slot. And we wanted to say, well, how would that prediction work against incoming prices? As you can see, we're not so good at predicting prices. That's why we're a technology company and we're not in the market. But what this shows is that in real time, we can calculate, we can ingest, we can persist, we can do calculations on the back end as well as on the front end. So this way you can incorporate any of your analytic models into this particular framework. So in financial service world, this is something that's very useful, and I can say from my past experience in 25 years in financial services, I have never seen a data platform able to do this. I have seen people write stuff programmatically in a cache, in memory, but never through a data platform. So this is, to me, actually pretty impressive. I hope you are also as impressed. This can also apply to many different areas. I was having a conversation with someone from UC Davis Health. From a health standpoint, if a person is hooked up to a ventilator and you want to do real-time analytics on that, well, this framework would actually work in that particular scenario. You get all the data from the ventilator, you process it, and as you're processing, if it hits a particular point where, let's say, it gets in a band or out of a band, you can mark it, you can notify somebody. During that period, have the nurse come over, take a look, have a doctor come over, and when it goes back into band, you can now keep track of this in a real-time manner. So this application is not specifically just to the financial world. And I will move on. We actually had some slides here, which we'll skip. So key takeaway from this particular demo is a lot of financial services firms do rely on us. We automate complex business and processes, right? And that's basically what our goal is. For the live trade valuation shows that we can take a very complex process in the financial services world, we can automate that, we can build something on top of it using our platform. And we did it within 3 to 4 weeks, which within most other companies would take them much, much longer. So one of the things, and I will wrap up a little bit early here, but just you know, we have a bunch of documentation if people are interested in learning more about this. Learning Systems Docs, Docs International, docs.intersystems.com. We also have a web page there for all the financial services technology that we do, particularly. And we are going to be at the Tech Exchange on the 5th floor. So if you have any additional questions or any other questions for Joe and I, you can feel free to come.
Also, if you have any at-scale questions, you want to stand for a second? We people know who you are. Dave here is with at-scale. He's in the partner pavilion. So if you have any specific at-scale related questions, he and his partner will be happy to help you with that. And we have plenty of time. Oh, by the way, the slides that we did not have screen. The slides we post will have screen images. Since we did the live demo, we didn't bother showing you the screen images, but if you download slides later. Also, all of these will be recorded with the audio tied to the video. So you'll be, if someone wants to see this later, you could later at some point when all these are available. If you have any questions, we do have a microphone here. Anybody have any specific questions?
Hear me?
Yep.
No, you can. Thank you. So you talked about other industries as well. I can see this applying to financial services with market data coming in. But it seems like this would, these scenarios also make a lot of sense for manufacturing.
Sure.
With streaming data from machine controllers.
Yeah, shipping.
Do you guys see that as well?
Yeah, shipping related data too. Yeah. As I said, these two particular examples are financial service related, but they show our technology being used. Could be, you know, what we just showed with adaptive analytics. That could be a variety of different use cases, not just financial. So there's lots of options here. Yeah, question.
Quick question on the Kafka. So what was the throughput that you have achieved with the JDBC integration? Like you said, 26,000 messages per second, right?
So we basically split it off into 10 topics per equity and per trade. So we have 10 equity topics, we have 10 trade topics, and we're hitting about anywhere between 1,200, 1,600 per topic.
Oh, okay. And the other question is the JDBC connector, the JDBC connection, that's not packaged with IRIS, right? So that you have built, you have custom built.
No, it's our standard JDBC.
Yep. So it's our standard JDBC package, library, but the beautiful part about InterSystems platform is you can build any JDBC. We have APIs. You can definitely build any API you want against it to integrate into the IRIS platform as well. So you're not stuck with just, if you want to do a REST call, you could do a REST call. JDBC is obviously going to be faster from a real-time standpoint. But we have a bunch of different interfaces that you could basically connect to, and would depend on the customer use.
Yeah. So this ingestion in this example was Java programs using JDBC, getting data from Kafka, and then sending it in through our standard JDBC.
How about the support? Because we at our organization have a similar use case. We are from healthcare. We get a ton of data from the hospitals, and we have Kafka. The challenge that we are facing is the throughput is not that high. And we are a Microsoft shop, so we couldn't use the JDBC connections. We had, I don't recall, I think if my memory serves right, we had a challenge in terms of having a native .NET adapter for Kafka within IRIS. So I was just curious on, is there any plan from a product perspective to put a more, like Confluent is a Kafka distributor, they have more native adapters and native libraries. So is there any plan to have a more specialized adapter available within IRIS to connect to a specific implementation of Kafka so that the throughputs are more faster?
Yeah, I'm not specifically aware, but the best thing to do is come by this tech exchange. Also, all of our product managers are here. So if there's nothing in the works and you really need it, guess who you can talk to?
Sure, thank you.
So we're always looking for your input. Any other questions? Yes, sure. Sure.
Suppose that you already mentioned it a little bit, that a use case could be in healthcare, continuous monitoring, maybe patients at home. So suppose you have a large population, the data you have to monitor. How does it work? Are you going to create use cases to look at certain types of data or types of information? Suppose maybe give me the patients who are, well, going outside some kind of a threshold or
yeah, that's the key question. What is the right use case? What are the right parameters? What is out of bounds? What is
no exactly. Yeah. But that this solution would be suited to.
It could, yeah, definitely could. Also, one of the things that we through the IRIS interoperability, part of IRIS interoperability includes a full rules engine. So if you needed to tweak the rules for different thresholds for different things, without having to write code, you could use the rules interface and change the rule to say, I now want to monitor anything above this level or below that level. Yeah. And so easily to customize and tweak that. Because chances are, if you're going to deploy this to different sites, not every site necessarily has the same rules. Yeah.
Even physicians themselves can change those rules?
If you give them access. One of the nice parts about IRIS is the security model can be as granular or as permissive as you want it to be. So you could set up a whole environment and say, you're only allowed to change these rules, but you can't change anything else about it.
And it's easy enough for them without any knowledge from the system itself?
Well, it depends on the physician.
Or yeah.
That's the truth. There's also a full API, so if you don't want to use our rules interface, you can create your own interface to it. Any other questions? We still have some time? If not, I'm sure there's more food in the hall for us. Last chance. Any more questions? Okay, I'm around, and Wei-Wen is around for the rest of this session. If you want to ask any more questions, we'll be around all week in the Tech Exchange. Please stop by the Partner Pavilion to see what's happening there. If you haven't had a chance yet, the Gartner kiosks are available, so please do a review there. And if no other questions, thank you for your time.